go, Tucker. What are the metallic Archaea?
Volcanic craters spewing sulfur. Water hot enough to boil your skin off. Ocean depths of 800 plus atmospheres. Wastelands radioactive enough to kill you where you stand. There are groups of organisms that survive despite. No. Because of living in such environments.
I've heard about them. Extremo... something.
Extremophiles. By selecting certain species, then subculturing and repeatedly modifying them, I created a metallic offspring of pure Archaea. They subsist on metals rather than organic matter.
And some of them even consume uranium?
Yes. Uranium enrichment Archaea metabolize only uranium-235. As a result, they produce weapons-grade enriched uranium.
How is that possible?
Consider how plants fractionate carbon isotopes when they conduct photosynthesis. Nature possesses abilities beyond our imagination.
So it was Archaea that brought down your chopper?
Corrosive Archaea, yes. They oxidize metals, feeding off the energy in the electrons they receive. What became of the wreckage?
We had the R&D team retrieve samples for study in airtight plastic containers, of course.
Prudent. We shall extract Archaea from it in good time. They should help you fight back against Blagana.
Any chance we could start now? It doesn't have to be a lot. I might just have another use for them.
If it's only a small amount you need.
That's fine. I'll get the R&D team to assist. Let's go.
South Africa was previously suspected of developing nuclear weapons. It already had a conspicuous presence at the UN because of apartheid and its armed expansionism. But when neighboring Angola and Mozambique became socialist countries in '74, South Africa felt hounded into a corner. So it accelerated its nuclear program to protect itself. 3 years later, the Soviets discovered a test facility, and 2 years after that, an American satellite observed a flash in the southern Indian Ocean. It said this was South Africa conducting a nuclear test with the help of a certain ally. Skullface used the situation in South Africa to get this ally to lend a hand. They both wanted nukes, so it was a mutually beneficial relationship. On the surface, anyway.
I figure South Africa started getting serious about nuclear weapons production in '75. In '74, the government was still able to get by with bluffing that it had a nuclear arsenal. But the year after, word spread that an independent armed group in the Caribbean was crushed by Cypher for possessing a WMD. That's right, boss. What happened to you and your men was the reason South Africa decided to push ahead with nuclear development. A force independent of any country getting its hands on a nuke. That was a threat to the existence of countries everywhere. It wasn't just South Africa. Your presence pushed a lot of countries to get nukes. The world was scared of you. You were a threat to more than just the Cold War. If nations are gears in a machine, you had the power to smash them loose and watch the whole world grind to a halt. Emmerich uses externally powered legs of his own design. It's bionics technology, a product of the U.S. military's failed attempt to develop a powered exoskeleton. All the wearer has to do is apply a little force, and the actuators continue the movement in that direction. But his legs are unique. Instead of using a hydraulic mechanism, the actuators run off metallic Archaea. That increases the actuator's reaction speed and also enables him to lock and release the joints at will. The legs are a nifty little gadget, but they have two clear weaknesses. First, they're dependent on external power, maybe because he built them knowing he couldn't leave his lab. There's no internal battery. That's why they won't work if they aren't plugged in. Second, and this is more than just a weakness, The legs are directly connected to his bones. Could be to minimize signal loss and the orders output to the legs and the drive response from them. Either way, Emmerich has used bolts to attach load-bearing parts directly to his femurs, probably by mimicking surgical treatment for compound fractures and the like. But the end result is those legs and his body are fused together, and that appears to be how he's able to move them so precisely. But that also means that any shock to the legs would be delivered right to his bones by way of those bolts. The same is true if he encounters the corrosive metallic Archaea. If the corrosive Archaea ate into the exposed bolts, they'd reach the endoskeleton parts and eat through them too in the blink of an eye. The doctor's bones are full of holes to accommodate all the bolts. They're like sponges. If he were to lose the reinforcing parts, even the tiniest bit of force or weight would snap his bones. So when I dangled those corrosive metallic Archaea in front of him, he realized straight away what would happen. Life wouldn't be worth living if he lost those legs of his. I'd bet that is what the doctor fears the most. I just helped him imagine what it would be like. Thanks to that, I got the information we needed without either of us getting hurt. You know how he is. He's probably already over the shock. The better you know your adversary, the easier it is for you to get information from them. And vice versa. You said that the nuke Skullface was trying to spread around the world were equipped with a failsafe. Something that could shut them down at will. His will.
Quite so. After all, he needed a guarantee that a buyer wouldn't simply turn the weapons back on him.
So how can they be stopped?
The criticality trigger, that is, the detonator, is a complete black box design. Any attempt to dismantle it causes it to melt in seconds, using the corroding Archaea. The design ensures that no detonation is possible unless he disengages the lock.
So he had a way to disengage it remotely.
Precisely. The client simply presses a button. At that moment, the detonator begins transmission with a surveillance satellite. The satellite reports to him how the client is trying to use the nuke. If he does not object, the lock is disengaged.
But if it's a risk to him in any way...
The detonator melts down. The same is true if detonation does not occur within a preset time after the lock is disengaged. The nuke is rendered useless.
Who the hell would buy something with strings attached like that?
The client would never know until the moment they actually try to use it. Most likely, he would have explained the time delay as the detonators needing time to activate. And he only intended to sell to technologically primitive groups in the first place.
Let me guess. He'd claim it was defective and offer a replacement. Shadier than a used car salesman.
Skullface shakes your hand like a friend, using the other to control you like a puppet. This is how he works.
This is yellow cake that Cypher was having the PFs transport. Before we met you, the boss recovered it from a truck crossing the savannah. Are there metallic Archaea inside it?
Yes, the Archea metabolize uranium-235 to subsist. They must be stored inside yellow cake, or they cannot survive.
So those biological traces we took for impurities were actually the real cargo.
Of course, they are deactivated, so they do not trigger a sudden enrichment. They are like baker's yeast. Yet, they do gradually enrich the uranium as they feed. I imagine you detected weapons-grade traces.
Yeah, we did.
And the malachite that was loaded on the truck had traces of uranium in it too. So that's the flower, huh? Skullface was gonna sell do-it-yourself nuke kits. The uranium-enriching Archaea complete with the user's manual. and the ores with the uranium could be sourced by the client or provided by Cypher.
Even the trace amounts buried in common ores can be enriched to weapons-grade uranium by the metallic Archaea. Proving that must have been the most important factor of the trials. That, and the ability to successfully prevent detonation.
So if the amounts of uranium in the ores are low enough, they can get past any inspection. And you only need a tiny amount of the Archaea to act as the yeast. No great challenge to smuggle that either. The first step towards saturating the world with nukes.
His plan. That was not my intention. My only goal in developing the metallic Archaea was to save the Dene.
What made you think a tool for creating undetectable nuclear weapons would save your people?
After 70 years, the Dene reclaimed the Navajo nation from which we were banished. We bore all the hardships of poverty, but we were proud to live off the land we called our own. But in the moment the atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima, everything changed.
I don't get it.
The nuclear arms race between the US and the Soviet Union began with the end of the Second World War. Suddenly, there was a massive demand for uranium. And it was our ill fortune that the ground beneath the Navajo Nation was rich with uranium ore. The Black Ana government set up mine after mine, and many of the Dene worked them, never informed of any danger. Every day, they went to work with no protection. The slag was simply piled out in the open. When rain fell, uranium traces left behind would seep out, and when the ground dried, it was blown about as dust. Land and water were contaminated, irradiated. Many of us became sick and died. That pain lives on to this day.
I had no idea.
Wanting more than anything to revive the land my forebears left to me, I was delighted upon discovering microbes that eat uranium. If they could be domesticated, I believed we could rid our land of uranium.
Were you successful?
No. The research called for funding on a colossal scale. But nobody was willing to invest with no prospect of a return.
And that's when Skullface showed up.
Correct. I can save you and your people. We share the same will. That is what he said to me. And I believed him. Black Ana forced me to abandon my uranium cleanup work and focus on nuclear weapons. And he held all the Dene hostage. Today, the uranium mines within the reservation are finally closing down. It is simply less expensive now to source uranium overseas.
New victims, different places.
But uranium is a tactical resource. To rely on a foreign country for it is a difficult decision to make. And he was in the perfect place to influence that decision.
He could have condemned your people to the mines forever.
The contamination comes not only from uranium. The fallout from the Nevada nuclear tests also settled on our lands. As if our fortune were not already bad enough. We are also downwinders. To save the Dene, I must complete my original research.